right, everybody. Thank you for joining. This is Whiskey Wednesday Weekly. Tonight I have a special guest, John Aitken. He corrected me twice before the show. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment. Obviously, it's how YouTubers do their thing and obviously get notifications and things like that. So make sure you click the little button on the bottom to subscribe. Make sure you comment on John's interview and leave me any feedback. So thank you so much, John Aitken. He is a 40-year educator out on the Tennessee. I think we find you right now, right, John?
That is correct. Here,
so
right
John and I met. It's a pretty cool story. This is kind of how we meet a lot of people, at least me and my wife do, whether it's vacation or just getting out. John and I went to, Mila and I went to Jamaica in July, and John and his wife, Jody, were a sweet couple that were hanging out in the Preferred Club pool, got to chatting them up. And, he thought we were making fun of each other with the dollars and the money, just cracking up. He was calling me an MD and I was calling him an EDD. I don't even know what half that shit meant, but it was a good time. And I think you were there just like a day shy of when we left, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
So John and I are, I will call him a friend via the phone for now, just because we haven't made it out to his area to see him since Jamaica or vice versa. But we do plan on seeing him out there. We got some friends in Tennessee and we plan on making a nice trip here probably next year. And he's one of our stops. So thank you so much for joining me tonight, John.
Finally, glad we finally hooked up on this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And real quick before we get into it, John actually just last week had to postpone due to the tragedy there in Tennessee. What was the town?
All right, we live in Collierville, Tennessee.
Collierville, and that was the Kroger store shooting. And I'd like to just take a second to acknowledge your friend. Not to make this a somber moment, but I know that she was a friend of yours, the one that did lose her life. So I'd like to just recognize her. What was her name?
Right. Her name was Olivia King, and not a close friend, but she had worked for the school system, which I was over for many years, and real active in the community. So real tragic. Yeah,
just tragic. And, and just want to recognize that for everyone that obviously is going through some mental illness or, anything that is just in that realm that makes people do what they do. So anyway, I appreciate that. And we'll get started. So John is joining us from Tennessee, and you said Collierville?
Right.
So tell me a little bit, just give me a couple minute synopsis about where you're at now, where you're from, and just kind of a 2-minute summary from where you started and just kind of where you're at now.
Sure. Grew up in a small town in West Helena, Arkansas, which is a river town, the next river straight down from Memphis, Tennessee. If you're familiar with Memphis, obviously home of FedEx and a great logistics company area, but Helena's about 80 miles south. Grew up there, real small town. Family, youngest of 3 boys, middle-class family. Went to college in Arkansas, played ball, became a teacher coach, ended up in Collierville, Tennessee. I chased Jody up the river in 1983. She was a neonatal intensive care nurse. So best decision, been blessed with landing in Collierville, Tennessee. Long career in education, as you mentioned, retired 2 years ago in 21 after 40 years as the superintendent of the school district here in Collierville Schools, and have been a full-time grandfather since then, along with doing a little consulting work. And I know we'll talk a little bit more later, but as Ken mentioned, we were blessed to meet them at a Secrets Resort in Montego Bay, Jamaica, as Hurricane Elsa was blowing through. So we survived Elsa.
I forgot about that. I forgot about the hurricane. Yeah, that's right. They had everything boarded down, and that was a good day, if I remember.
Yeah, it was fortunately much ado about nothing, but it caused us to stay in a hot tub on the deck and talk and have a large time. And he was tipping the lady at the pool a much larger amount than I was. So that's how we met.
Yeah, I think that day on the deck, we both were probably not realizing we were hearing certain things we shouldn't have heard. So
no comment.
Well, because we are distant and John's not a huge whiskey drinker, he was awesome enough to go out and get 3 good bottles from his area of the world. I've had 2 of those. The one in the middle I've not heard of, because that sounds very local, even though the other 2 are extremely popular. So we're going to do things a little different. We're going to start with a drink, but we're not going to do shots. We're actually going to taste, and then between the questions, we'll knock back that particular whiskey that each of us have, which will give us 3 drinks each, but we'll talk a little bit about each of them. So that being said, we typically start off traditionally with a drink. And what are you going to start with first, John?
I guess I'll start with the small batch Colonel Taylor.
All right. Now, Colonel Taylor's from Kentucky, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, and it was hard for me to get a Kentucky bourbon, it being here in Tennessee, but I had it here and had been gifted that actually at my retirement 2 years ago, and I figured what better occasion than to crack it right here. I'm sure it's
nice. Well, I will say that bottle is the gentleman who originally started the first distillery was from the Civil War era. And then since then, now it's being distilled out of the Buffalo Trace distillery. I'm sure you're familiar with Buffalo Trace, right?
I almost got that for the show, but I changed my mind. So.
Well, I'm starting with it's called Barrel. That's an actual name of the whiskey. It's called Barrel Rye. It's cask strength. So they actually write down each particular bottle, handwritten, each one of which barrel it came out of and the proof and the date. So this one is 57.82%. So it's 116 proof. It's 7 years and it's straight rye. So it's a very solid whiskey. So let's do a little pour and let's get talking.
A little bit of this, we'll make the end of the show, right?
If you've not checked out some of my shows, I've done 6 monster shots with one of the guys. He's a super trainer from LA. And I was so plowed afterwards. I was like talking sideways. So
yeah,
it was a good time. Yeah, that was pretty strong. It's 104 proof.
Yeah. Just
all right. Well, cheers from a distance, brother.
All right. Cheers.
We'll taste it first and then we'll sip it. Yeah.
I could do more of those.
Did you do neat or you have some rocks?
No, I'm just doing neat.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one. That's actually a very good bottle that someone gave you if it was gifted. So
yeah, that's one of the few who liked me when I retired.
The other people gave you a bag. Other people gave you some balloon animals and shit. All right. So I do want to go back to the small town because I'm from a small town as well. And I don't know how small town yours was, but mine was fairly small, probably on the larger side now, but just because of growth. But being from a small town, I know that I've had a few things that now you've got a couple years on me, not too many. But being from a small town, I know that when I grew up, there are certain things that you can learn from a small town versus a big, town like, California area where there's not a lot of rural, there's not a lot of, driving your bike down the street to your friend's house and those type of things. And obviously times have a lot to do with that. Where we grew up and the era we grew up in wasn't as, I guess, inflicted with pedophiles and things like that and social media and everyone else getting out there. So what could you take from being from a small town? Was it something you not really regret, but since you didn't know any better, with your parents and the finances, I mean, just give me a couple minutes of what you feel like growing up in a small town would be versus maybe where your kids are growing up now, even though you're in a smaller area. I know they're probably more populated.
Yeah, and I think I can give it a couple of references and points to make. I grew up in West Helena, Arkansas, which at the time was the sister city to Helena. Helena was the oldest. West Helena was the manufacturing side of it. To tell you how much it's changed since then, as that area has dried up economically, a lot of social problems, industry, any kind of jobs have left. That whole area now, Helena and West Helena are now a consolidated city, a combined population of 12,000. Whereas the two together, when I was growing up, were right at 42 or 43,000. So,
oh wow!
See, yeah, it's pretty depressed area.
So it's actually gone in reverse.
Yeah, it's gone in reverse, as a lot of the Arkansas Delta has done. I know, the Delta is the home of the blues, and they've got a lot of it going on down there right now because it's. But I wouldn't trade the experience of growing up there. You said it. I didn't know any better, but we were close enough to Memphis, which was the big city then. Sure. We came up there a lot and knew the fun that happened in the city. But the small town growing up, that atmosphere of knowing everybody and everybody knowing you, obviously, hopefully the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. But if everybody knew you, that means if you got in trouble somewhere else, it followed you home and you got in trouble again. Exactly. My dad was a pretty popular guy with a lot of the community. He was a vet, World War II vet, as most of the parents were then. So the community, that was a community of that type of people in West Helena. I had two older brothers, which means, as you know, got any older siblings, in my case, I paid for their mistakes too. So they were 6 and 8 years older than me. And if they got in any kind of trouble or were doing something, I caught it as well. And all I heard all my life growing up was, we're going to watch you. You can't do what your older brothers did. And they're both fine, upstanding citizens now. But, you always had to pay and live with their mistakes as well.
Yes.
But,
yes.
I still keep up with friends. I've been gone from that area now over 40 years. And I still have 2 or 3 close friends now that we keep up with, and good times and memories that we share. So I'll trade that experience with for anything.
Yeah, I've got like 3 or 4 guys, that I keep up with. Obviously, when I go back home or something, we see them. So those are just that's kind of the way it is, right? For everyone who leaves home eventually, right? Or they stay, and that's kind of where they end up, which is fine too. So you did mention something that surprised me, and not because we wouldn't talk about it during vacation. It's not something you're going to bring up, but you are pretty tall. And you talked about in high school, you sounds like a pretty good basketball player, because you said you got a scholarship to college. Now, I know that basketball, usually everybody I have on here, whether it's even a guy or a girl, has always played some form of sports. I don't know why. It's just that was part of their life. But you growing up being a sports guy or basketball guy, talk a little bit about what position you played, or what, real brief, just what position were you mainly? Point guard?
Believe it or not, I'm almost 6'9". I'm shrinking a little bit as I get older.
You were the center.
Well, believe it or not, I grew late in high school. I was the point guard as a freshman in high school.
Okay.
So I grew, progressively through the years, and actually grew another couple of inches after I graduated from high school, late bloomer. Actually grew another inch after I got out of college at 21 years old.
Wow.
So, I fortunately, being the youngest of 3 boys, the older 2 were very athletic. My older brother's quarterback on the high school football team. My middle brother, starter on the high school basketball team, state runners up. So, I watched it, and I had to absorb it and suck it all in, and I either got tough and got better, or I went, got whipped every day by them. Mm-hmm. But obviously made an advantage for me. Since I grew late and everything, I got a scholarship to play small college basketball in Arkansas. And nice. For my benefit, my parents were, I mentioned before, middle class, and that was a full ride, full scholarship, which opened up a lot of doors for me and gave me some things and opportunities that I otherwise might not have gotten.
Correct.
There was a community college, 2-year college in our hometown that my mother was actually the business office manager. I could have gone there and played basketball, but as you know, when you're 17, 18 years old, you're ready to get out of the small town and go experience life. So
right, that's awesome. And you got a 4-year ride. I mean, and you played all 4 years, right?
Played all 4 years.
Nice.
Had a real successful NAIA program then, and ups and downs as all college. I don't care what level you're at. College athletics is a business.
Yep.
But it's you're doing. You have to go to breakfast. You got to go to class. You got to run the steps if you miss curfew. You got to do study hall. So I mean, there's always people checking up on you. Not a lot of free time, but you're never able to trade those experiences. Because that otherwise wouldn't have gotten my laugh all the time. I don't know that I ever experienced a true college life, and I tried to make up for it after I got out.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Hey, man, you know what? Like you said, people have their past, and you were blessed, and you didn't take advantage of that blessing. And, and that's what people should look back at. I mean, when someone's listening, they're like, oh, of course you got the great education because, but you know what? You had to work. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. You don't just, get it. Very few of us fall out of bed talented. You know what I'm saying? We have, other than myself, joking.
Well, I was waiting on Mila to answer your rebut that.
She's not in here, else she'd smack me on the head. But no, for real, it's like, we all have to work at whatever our craft is, and so I feel like that just started early for you to, whether it's in school or whatever you end up doing in life, you were able to really succeed on that. Now, let me ask you this, though. I guess ultimately playing college basketball and collegiate basketball, did that help you, prepare for the real world, like you said, because of the hard lessons and the discipline and stuff? I mean, even though you went afterwards and kind of had that celebratory time, I assume it still structured your life in a way that like military did for me.
Yeah, I don't, there's no question. I think athletics probably is the biggest influence on my life, as far as work.
Sure.
Because of all the things, the intangibles and the tangibles. Sorry, I didn't turn mine off.
That's right. It's pretty in the middle of the interview.
Yeah, hopefully it's gone now. There's no better way of learning how to work with other people than there is when you're military, but when you're sitting and living in a dorm with other people of varying backgrounds and
right.
All those types of things that are coming together for one good, and that's to try to win basketball games. You have to learn how to get along. You have to learn when you play the stereo loud or you get in a fight. You got to learn
right.
coming in and borrowing your clothes. You have to learn who you can fight and who you can't fight. I mean, but you also know how to massage egos.
Right, right.
You have to know how to manage conflict, because there's always conflict in anything like that.
Right. Yeah, no, it makes sense. It's very military-like. I mean,
oh gosh, I mean, and it was very structured.
Right.
And I still to this day, retired, I don't do well if I don't have a schedule every day, and it drives me crazy. I'm retired, I don't have to do this, but I still need some structure in my life.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, I think I've loosened the reins a little bit. Mila, has always been, you always have to plan something. Now, granted, she loves when I plan things, right? Like surprises and going and setting stuff up. She lets me do all that. She doesn't really do any of that stuff because that's my personality. But at the same time, I've learned to relax a little bit. Like, okay, we can just, she's like, why do you have to walk for an hour only? Why can't we walk maybe for an hour and a half if we just feel like it? And I'm like, all right, I'll take it easy. So now let's before we get to the next part, how's your drink doing?
My drink is almost needed out, so I'm pretty good shape.
Well, I just needed mine out because I think we're going to pour one more, and then I got some of the Jody stuff coming up.
All right.
What are you going for next? The George Nickel?
I'm Tennessee. I have to do Tennessee whiskey.
Now, that's a special bottle? I looked it up, right? That's the small
that is. That's a 13-year-old George Dickel bottled in bond, Tullahoma, Tennessee.
Yes.
So it's that's why when I got it, when we talked a little bit about it, that the guy said you may or may not be able to get it's 100 proof.
Yep.
But if you live in Tennessee, you got to do a little Tennessee whiskey. So
and Mila's, you said you didn't think I'd have it. Well, it's a running joke around here, and this is funny because George Dickel is her favorite whiskey. Well, when I had her and the 5 other Wine Wednesday girls on the interview last year, it was one of the whiskeys because she loves George Dickel, and I said. When I announced it, I was like, yes, Mila loves the Dickel. It's just kind of a running joke when you were like, I don't know if you've had this. I'm like, yes, I've not had the bottle. I've not had the bottle in bond, but we do love George Dickel, and it is a good bottle. And like you said, that was a 2008 bottle right there. I mean, so that's a special bottle.
Yep.
So I went with the Few, and that's an actual bourbon whiskey, and it's a really good bottle. I got it from a Flavier subscription. It's on the higher side. Most of mine now, are on the higher side, just, except your everyday Jack or something that I'm going to have for Jack and Cokes or something. But this one's a really good bottle. And I actually tried it the other day. It's a little bit sweet. So enjoy ours together. Another virtual cheers.
Cheers.
And we'll get into
California.
Oh, that's good. No offense, but that's better than the other one. How's yours?
Mine may be better than the other one too.
Yeah, the George Dickel and Bottle and Bond special. I mean, think about 13 years. That's a pretty that's a pretty good time sitting in a bottle.
It's a little smoother.
Yeah, a little smoother, even though that Taylor's amazing bottle. So let me talk about this. Jody, your sweetheart. What year? You said 83 is when you met her or married her?
Married her in 83, right.
Okay. Now, she is a doll baby, and I'm sure, you could say that as well, but I'm sure you guys, had your normal struggles like any marriage couple. But when you had mentioned to me in the pre-discussion about how the big break, was to find her and then move, you were in Arkansas and you met her there, or did you meet her somewhere else in college?
No, I actually met her. I had moved back to my hometown after graduating from college to coach.
Okay.
And met her there. And we started dating. She was a neonatal intensive care nurse and was just starting at the Newborn Center, which is one of the premier neonatal intensive care centers in this region.
Right.
And she started working there and was commuting back and forth. And I applied for a job in this area, didn't get it. So we were going to do long distance. I was going to Little Rock, Arkansas. She was going to come here, and I guess we were going to meet in Brinkley and have conjugal visits or something at the McDonald's parking lot and try to make it happen. I don't know how it was going to work, but but then I got a call when I mentioned the big break, and from Collierville, Tennessee, the high school here where we are now,
Right.
since '83, and accepted the job there. So we decided to get married. We got married on July the 4th at 10 o'clock in the morning.
So we were in Jamaica for your anniversary.
Yep, that's why we were one of the reasons. My birthday and our anniversary. That's right.
Did I don't remember you celebrating that, or at least bringing
we
that
probably
up.
talked about it at the pool. You didn't remember. That was maybe when you were coming back from one of your visits.
Excursions or whatever.
So yeah, and then we moved here to Collierville and have been here ever since. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. Now let me ask you this. You talk about I forgot to ask you, in college you did mention that you were thinking about pharmaceutical, right? So at what year did you decide I'm going to do education and structure my life towards that? Was there like a meaningful change, or is it just mental? It just happened?
Yeah, I think probably playing basketball and enjoying it. And then there was one of my I majored in math. So, kind of was leaning toward that. I'll tell you a funny story in a minute of probably an opportunity that I squandered, but maybe not. But the guy who kept the book for the college basketball for our games was one of my professors. And he kind of became a mentor to a lot of us, but particularly those of us who he felt like were studying math. We were his guys. And when I, just started talking to him, doing some things, the pharmacy thing was a high school buddy of mine who I still remain in contact with. I'll actually see him this weekend. We were in math classes together. We played basketball together. And we were going to got out. We were going to pharmacy school. We were going to start Watkins Pharmacy. His name is Dean Watts. I'm John Aitken. It was going to be Watkins. I'd say
nice.
I even let him have top billing. So that was
you were like, I'm humble. I don't care. I just want to do business.
But somewhere along the line in college, I decided I wanted to get out and make a lot of money. So I decided to teach and coach. Whatever I was thinking then, I was. That kind of pushed me that way. I actually, the story about an opportunity, and you're going to laugh at this, maybe not. May call me stupid, but I
might
was
cry if you gave up Amazon.
The town where I went to school was called Arkadelphia, Arkansas, and it was 30 minutes south of Hot Springs, Arkansas, which is famous for a couple of things. It was a former gambling capital back in the Al Capone days, but it has baths, hot springs, and it has horse racing, Oak Lawn horse track. So our weekends in college, a lot of them were spent going back and forth to Hot Springs to the horse track and, playing the ponies and doing all things college guys do.
Right.
Well, I had a placement interview on a Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the spring that the college had set up for me with a company. The night before, Friday night, we went to Hot Springs and obviously laid out a little bit too long. The placement interview that next morning I missed. And it was with a little small company just starting called Federal Express.
Oh, geez.
And looking for math teachers, math majors, computer software. My career worked out great and everything worked out great. I tell people all the time, FedEx is not going to amount to anything, and they're not going to do it.
Yeah, you were just selling yourself on that whole, I just missed up somehow.
Yeah, nothing to it. So, but yeah, no, that's probably the example of life's different twists and turns.
Of course.
You can have great plans, but things happen that turn you another way.
And you know what? You really can't, you can't stew on that, if you will, because honestly, like you said, and no offense, I'm sure being a teacher was great, but it's where it took you at the end, right? Being able to be in charge of the district. Because we know I have my boys' school, we're in a smaller town up here in California. It's a very small town, lots of land, and what's interesting is that principal became I guess what's it called after that when you now run the district?
Superintendent or director of schools, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, I mean, that's a big jump in pay, especially out here in California. But what I'm saying is, I'm sure FedEx would have been great, stocks and all that stuff, but, you wouldn't have met the people, you wouldn't have the relationships probably quite the same. So you can never really look back on it. Now, if you would have said something like, yeah, I'm sitting there and this guy scribbles on a napkin and says, just give me $100 today for, FedEx stock or Amazon or, one of those crazy companies like Microsoft back then. And you were like, nah, I don't have $100, that's different. Then I would have come across to Tennessee and kicked you in the head.
Yeah, probably had a couple of those too,
but we all do. That's the problem. I didn't even know about that stuff when I was young. So you bring up the fact that you guys had 3 kids, right? Now, if everyone, I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but he did have 3 kids. One, I think you said is 41 now, right? That's the one that lives in Texas.
right?
Okay. Then you have a middle one, and there are 2 girls that are in the middle, correct? Well, I mean, middle and
2 boys, and then the youngest
oh, I'm sorry. So the third one was the girl. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the surprise and kind of how the 3 kids, and if you guys are wondering why I'm getting into this, it's kind of a cool story. So just a real quick, like how the kids were born, and then, the other parts of it.
Sure. How long do we have? I mean,
just give me a couple minutes synopsis.
Well,
I told you your conjugal visit in McDonald's and
yeah. Well, Jody and I, obviously we met in West Helena. Part of the story is Jody was married before and already had Bruce. So
okay.
Bruce was 2 and we started dating. When we got married, he was 3.
Okay.
We moved to Collierville at that point. When she had Bruce, before I met her, real ugly delivery, prolonged delivery of 30-something hours before they sectioned her.
Okay.
Obviously had to have a D&C later on to clear up all the problems associated with that. We moved to Collierville. She requested records, found out that during the D&C, her uterus had been perforated. She had scarred all over. So we start going to different things to try to, start our own family.
Right.
She went through years, seems like hundreds of years, but looking back at it now, but a series of infertility treatments. We went to Vanderbilt University because of the issues caused by that.
Wow.
And if you know Jody and have ever met her, I know you've met her, but never seen her around kids. She is the baby whisperer.
Right.
So wanting to have a baby and obviously wanting to have one together for us was, our dream, but we became foster parents through the Department of Children's Services here in Memphis. So we got emergency placements. I was coaching, she was nursing. She worked weekends as a weekender shift, and of course, and then so I worked during the week and blah, blah, blah. But we kept foster kids, emergency placements, typically abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, those types. We got emergency placement babies because of her experience.
Can we pause for a second?
Yes, sir.
I don't remember where you were, emergency placements. I want people to understand because I was thrown off. So I know that some people may know what that is, but fostering is where you take on multiple kids, correct? You're not going for adoption. You're actually, at one point, you've probably had many people through your home or kids, correct?
That is correct. We had, I may have the number not quite right, but we had 12 over a period of about a year and a half.
Wow. Now, what does that entail other than, is it just kind of like, we need them for the weekend, a week, and why is so many in a short period of time? What is fostering about other than we know you're helping somebody, but why do they not stay?
Yeah, well, it depends on the situation. Obviously, the goal of any relationship like that is, if at all possible, you want to return them to the birth parents.
Got it.
In some cases, that's impossible. Some cases, but they get turned over to a relative, a grandparent, or something like that.
Okay.
But they get a referral to Department of Children's Services for some incident that happened.
Okay.
And if that happened, let's take a simple one of a sexual abuse of an infant. If we have a little baby that they have, possible sexual abuse, they immediately come into the home, they turn it over to the Department of Children's Services. They can't have any contact with that child. So that's when they enlist the aid of their foster parents out there like Jody and I were.
And that's what refers to as an emergency, you're saying?
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. That's a big deal, because I want people to understand that's not, you're working parents and nurse and teacher, and you've got the heartbreak, the love, the compassion that you guys have. I don't want that to be overlooked. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, that's a big deal. And so, I mean, I want to make people understand that, you know, you guys should be commended for that, even though I know you were looking at it as that's just us. That's what we do. We love kids, and that's what we were doing. But I want people to understand that's a real, I don't want to say burden. It's a tough part to have someone in, love it for 2 weeks, a month, and then have to, you know, I guess, give that child back to the parents or the, you know, the system, if you will. So I just want to say thank you for that.
And the unknown of that is the hard part. You're turning them back over, and
right,
you don't know.
In your mind, you're thinking this could be the child that we end up raising, right? Because that's the whole point. So to go back to your story about how it ended up happening, and you know, over the years of the kid, or the year and a half of the kids, how you ended up keeping one.
So the last one we kept was the most difficult one. He was born at 28 weeks. He weighed 2 pounds, 8 ounces, a lot of issues. So Jody brought him home. He was born in May. We brought him home on Labor Day, and a lot of issues. He ended up having to go back to the hospital. He got a respiratory syncytial virus, which is real common now, called RSV with babies. But back then, no one knew anything about RSV. And Jody actually worked with a doctor who pioneered the virus to treat, the treatment for the virus, RSV. For the purpose of the interview, we can prolong this as long as possible. We kept him. There were some issues came up. We decided we were going to send him back. They didn't have a place for him. During that time, I was coaching a basketball game against our rival, and came home, and she showed me the positive EPT test. So she was pregnant. Well, she had miscarried many times before, and we kind of, okay. So all of these things are going on all at once, but she did end up pregnant. She did end up bleeding. She did end up having to go back to the hospital. She did end up in bed on bed rest for 6.5, 7 months. And we eventually ended up keeping the foster child while Jody was pregnant. We had both of them, and obviously with Bruce as the oldest one, and carried the miracle baby, Hallie, who's now 33, to term almost. And we had Hallie, and then we adopted Shay on his 4th birthday. So
Nice.
We now were complete at that time. They were 2.5 years apart.
So you're saying to me then, this is the part I didn't get in the pre-discussion. So you're saying that while you have a 28-month, which is just over 2 years, right? This is your middle child.
Right.
Okay, correct?
That's right. He is ours now. He's 35.
Right. So during this whole time, you're taking care of this baby. Jody gets pregnant with the miracle baby, which is the daughter. And you're just thinking, oh my gosh. So now you've got, you're excited because you got a foster child that is officially adopted pretty much a year and a half, maybe, after the baby, your first, the daughter was actually a year and a half roughly. So they came together, and then now you have your 3 children. That is so cool. And what's funny, you have 2 grandchildren, right?
That's correct.
Which are from the daughter, the youngest.
Right. They're from the miracle
baby who wasn't supposed to be born, and she's the one that gave you 2 grandchildren first, correct?
That is correct. And she had a lot of the fertility issues her mama had. So she had to have in vitro. They went through in vitro fertilization also. So So we've got the mom, the miracle baby, and now the twins who, you know how I feel about them.
Well, my boys are twins, and they're 19 now. And I will say that my son, both of them almost 3'10", almost 2'8". Isn't that funny?
Wow, that is.
When you brought that up, I was almost crying a little bit because they were both tiny, first of all, but the one was getting suffocated by the other. And so for them to actually, grow up to be 6 foot, 6'1" now, it's amazing, right? So
our foster child, who was 2'8", is now about 6 feet tall, about 275. So
okay.
he's big.
Oh my goodness. Well, I love that stuff. Well, we're going to do our last, if you have any left, let's not.
All right, I got to neat this one out.
I've got a part of the story that we're going to wrap up with. Not, I mean, it's about 10 minutes, but we got to get into our third tasting, which you're getting into. Which one now? This is the local one, right?
I'm in the local one now, so I'm interested in seeing how this one tastes.
And it's called Huling?
It's Huling Station. It was the warehouse way back in the railroad days.
1886, yeah.
Right, and then Dominic Canale. Canale is a famous family in this area. There have been beer distributors, obviously have a long tie to Memphis. And it is 52% corn, 44% rye, 4% malted barley.
Yeah, they gave it good reviews. I looked it up online, and they have 3 different whiskeys. They have a wheat, they have a standard bourbon, and then that one. And they said that one actually was pretty smooth. So the critics agree. Now this one, I went Costco. Now, not that, but they actually make a new one. The bottle and bond you were talking about earlier with the Dickel.
Right.
So Costco just came out with the Kentucky bourbon bottle and bond Kirkland brand.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I go to Costco at least twice a week because I don't know why. I'll bring that up another day. I don't know why, but every time I go, I look at the whiskey, and this one just showed up. And I had a friend of mine say, "Have you tried that yet?" And I'm like, "I just bought it." So ironically, I did taste it the other day. It's very smooth. So another virtual cheers to our last one. We got
Cheers.
Hurling and Kirkland. Here we go. Okay, so if anyone's wondering, of the 3, mine's the Few is my favorite.
I like the last one, but I think the Dickel's my favorite.
So you like the Dickel as well? Okay. Yeah. I'll tell Jody about that. She might.
Yeah.
Sounds like a personal problem.
Yeah.
All right. So the last thing I wanted to hit on, sorry, I got notes here. You know, being an educator, and again, let's go into this. So how long, real quick, just how long did you teach versus when you got promoted to the district person?
Sure. It's a great, I did everything. I taught, coached, taught and coached for 12 years total. 16 years, 5 as an assistant principal of a high school of about a 2,200 student high school.
Oh, wow. Big.
Then 11 years as high school principal at
Okay.
that same school. A year as assistant superintendent of a 50,000 student district, 51 schools. And then superintendent of Shelby County Schools, which is, if you're familiar with the Memphis area or not, there's the city of Memphis, and then it's in Shelby County. So all the area outside the city limits inside the county. Did that for 5 years. Actually got embroiled in a merger. If you study your history, Memphis City and Shelby County Schools merged. Real contentious. The city schools was actually 100,000 students, twice the size of our county district. And they basically went into a board meeting and voted 5-4 to go out of business.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so according to Tennessee law, the county is responsible for educating the children. So Shelby County Schools became the de facto school system, even though it ended up being the opposite of that. So right. I did that for 5 years. The last 3 basically were spent in federal court and working on all the nuances and processes of merging.
Right, merging, yeah.
Completely different districts, and they strung both of the superintendents along pretty good.
Wow.
Normally when 2 businesses merge, a decision is made pretty quickly who the boss is. It's either him, or it's neither one of you. We're going to bring somebody else in. And they strung both of us along for a while. So they basically strung us both along long enough that we both left.
Oh, there you go.
So I actually retired one time in 2013. And then legislation changed in Tennessee, probably because of a result of all the turmoil in Shelby County at the time. And they lifted the ban on independent or municipal school districts. So independent school districts they were in Tennessee, then they couldn't form for a while, and then they put it back in. So where I live, Collierville is a suburb of Memphis, and it was allowed to form its own school district. The voters had to vote in a referendum and agree to pay X amount. And so that happened. I was consulting at the time. So they backed me in a corner one day in the board chairman's house and said, "You want to be our superintendent or not?" And so I ended up doing that and spent the last 5 years forming a school district in 6 months, then running it, then building a huge high school, and then retiring again.
Well, it's interesting at that point, though, when they call you in, you're always like, here's the napkin, brother.
That's about right.
I'm just saying, right? You're like, look, I mean, that I can tell, like, that's how you became EVD. And I still can't believe you didn't tip as much.
And hey, and that the good thing about that, I didn't even have to push the napkin forward. They were pushing it to me.
They're like, here's the check. How many zeros do you want? Right? I love it.
That's exactly right.
So we all know that the last 18 months, God, it's going to be 2 years in February that we all went crazy. The pandemic, and I know this is kind of a closing topic, and we don't need, I'm not saying we don't need to harp on it, but you wanted to bring up a little bit about, you being an educator for so many years, and then your wife being a nurse. I don't know if Jody's retired or no.
She is retired. She's full-time grandmother too.
But she also understood what nurses go through, and obviously you as educators, I don't know if you were probably pulled in a little bit during the pandemic, right?
Right.
Whether it's on Zoom or whatever. Just you wanted to bring it up and how educators and nurses and just kind of get that respect back. And I know a lot of people still love those both, right? But I also feel like some people have also stepped on those careers. So I'm going to give you it's a platform for a couple minutes, and then
I love platforms. An educator loves platforms like a politician. No, it's and I won't harp on it too much, but when we entered the pandemic back in the spring of 2020,
right?
When they were closing schools down and parents were basically having to keep their kids at home all day and try to teach them via Zoom, Microsoft Teams, whatever the platform is.
Right.
All the posts and all of the things about educators is, oh God, we don't pay y'all enough. We don't know how y'all put up with this.
Correct.
Two in their house.
Positive for the.
That's right. It was positive, and now as we progress through this thing, it just seems like it's just turned where they're not the anointed children anymore, as far as for in the eyes of parents, and I think that's probably minority. I think it's and the same can be said about those in the medical profession. My gosh, I'm watching people, and Jody still talks to the nurses and doctors she used to work with, and we're not going to get in a political statement of anti-vaccine or anti-mask or whatever else, but you can see the effects of it happening now in the hospitals, where it's like Hunger Games, where you're coming in there and saying, well, that one's had the vaccine, that one hasn't, and that one's on, who do I put on the ventilator at this time?
Right.
And those are ethical decisions that
no one should really have to make.
That is exactly right. And now they're leaving, both sides are leaving the profession in droves. They're having a hard time staffing hospitals. They're having a hard time staffing schools. And it's just because I think of the lack of respect and demands. I don't know how either profession does it right now. I really don't, because
a lot of it might be exhaustion too. I mean, I'm not doubting what you're saying, but at the same time, I feel like I don't do a lot of the TikToking, and I don't follow all that. So I don't know who's bashing who, but what I'm saying is I think at some point there's like the high of the appreciation, and then there's like the you just kind of forget about it, right? Because we're moving on again, and then you're back in the old, hey, the nurses are the nurses. And so I feel like that's kind of where it's at, even though it's not right. I'm just saying, I feel like some people are like, I am exhausted.
Yeah.
Right. I'm exhausted, and I'm at my point where I can either retire or go do something else, or, whatever it is. And then the people that are staying, and then the people are, that are just getting in have to kind of stay. So I do appreciate you bringing that up, because it does mean that, we as a society, and I'm certainly no judge, so I don't really have a platform to speak on other than just bringing it up. It's just everyone appreciates everybody when it's in the moment, right? Just like the hero, it's like eventually the hero is in a record book, and unless you know who he is or someone brings him up, he's not going to be brought up, right? So the pandemic will be a history book, just like 2001 with the attack. All that stuff is, my kids weren't born then, so those heroes are brought up, and so I guarantee you that those teachers and nurses and all that stuff will be brought up in the history books, and there'll be stories to be told. And
I hope so.
I hope so too, but I feel like it will. So John, I just wanted to thank you for tonight, and I appreciate it so much. And I know your story is so big, it could go on for days, but I just love the ability to get into the meat and the potatoes of it. And I appreciate you drinking some whiskey. I'm sure you're a little buzzed right now because
I'm good. I'm good.
But we'll sign off for now, and we'll see you next time. All right, peace.
All right, tell Mila Strode Boone hello for me.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later.
Take care.